Apache girl was left unclothed and stoned until the cowboy covered her with his new coat. The sun was high in the sky, casting a harsh, golden light over the rocky desert. The wind whispered through the canyons, carrying dust and dry sand across the barren land. Nayeli, a young Apache girl, ran as fast as her legs could carry her, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She was small and light, but the fear that filled her made her move faster than she ever had before. Behind her, she could hear the angry shouts of people chasing her. They were throwing stones, not just at her, but near her, trying to make her stumble, trying to hurt her. Nayeli did not understand why they hated her, why they wanted to chase her away from her own home. All she knew was that she had to survive. Her clothes, torn in the chaos of the attack, offered little protection. The wind tugged at the thin fabric, and the harsh sunlight burned her skin. She could feel the stares of the crowd, harsh and unforgiving, as if their eyes alone could wound her. Each step she took was painful, but she did not stop. Nayeli knew that stopping meant certain danger. Her mind raced. She had grown up in these lands, learning to read the desert, learning to move silently through the rocks and sand. But now she felt more exposed than ever. The stones continued to fly, and Nayeli had to duck and dodge to avoid them. One hit the ground just inches from her feet, sending sand into the air and blinding her for a moment. She stumbled but did not fall. Tears pricked her eyes, not just from the sand, but from the fear that gripped her. She had seen her people scatter during the attack. Her family had tried to fight back, tried to protect their home, but they had been outnumbered. Now she was alone. Alone with nothing but the desert around her and the relentless anger of strangers. She could hear the shouting getting closer. The sound was like a storm chasing her, loud and terrifying. Nayeli's breathing came in short, sharp gasps as she tried to push herself harder. Her small legs were tired, and her arms ached from running and shielding herself. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the people behind her, faces twisted with anger, throwing more stones. Panic surged through her chest, making her run even faster. She did not think about where she was going. All she could think about was surviving. The canyon she ran through was narrow, with high rocks on either side. The shadows offered some relief from the sun, but they also made it harder for her to see where she was going. She stumbled over a jagged rock, scraping her hands and knees, but she did not stop. She pushed herself up and kept running, her mind only on moving forward, on staying alive. Every step was agony, but she could not let herself fall. She could not let them catch her. Nayeli's thoughts were a jumble of fear and confusion. She had never faced such hatred before. She had grown up among her people, learning the ways of the land, learning to respect the animals, the plants, and the river that gave life to the desert. She had never understood why outsiders sometimes came to harm them, but now she felt the sharp sting of danger, and it was real. It was not a story or a warning from the elders. It was here, in the stones thrown at her, in the shouts that filled the canyon, in the burning heat of the sun on her skin. As she ran, she tried to remember what her mother had taught her. "Keep your mind clear, Nayeli," her mother had said. "The desert can be a friend if you know how to move with it. It can hide you, it can guide you, but you must be calm." Nayeli tried to breathe slowly, tried to calm her racing heart. She focused on the sound of the wind, the rough texture of the rocks beneath her hands when she stumbled, the pattern of shadows and light. She tried to be invisible, to become part of the desert, but it was hard. The fear was too strong, and her small frame was easy to see in the open canyon. The stones kept coming, some hitting the ground, some bouncing dangerously close to her. She could feel one graze her arm, leaving a sting that made her wince. She bit her lip to stop from crying out. Pain and fear mixed in her body, but she could not stop. She could not let them see her weakness. She thought of her father, who had told her stories of brave Apache warriors who had protected their people. She tried to remember their courage, their determination, and it gave her a spark of strength. She would not give up. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Nayeli's energy was draining, but she did not notice. All she noticed was the constant threat behind her, the stones, the shouting, the burning sun, and the fear of being caught. She pressed herself against a rock wall, trying to hide for a moment, but there was nowhere to go. The canyon was narrow, and the people chasing her were relentless. She held her breath, hoping that if she stayed very still they would pass, but they did not. She could hear them getting closer again. Her legs shook as she ran, her small body straining with the effort. She had never felt so tired, so scared. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to give up, but another voice inside told her to keep moving. "Keep moving," it said. "You are strong." "You are brave. You can survive this." She repeated these words like a chant, letting them push her forward. She ran faster, dodging more stones, feeling the wind on her face, feeling the rough rock scrape her skin, and still she ran. Then, through the haze of fear, she saw a figure on the horizon. At first, she thought it was another threat, another person who would hurt her. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was a man on horseback. His clothes were clean, his coat bright against the dusty desert. He looked different from the people chasing her. There was no anger in his face, no shout, no stone in his hand. He just watched her, steady and calm. Nayeli did not know what to think. Could she trust him? The fear in her chest told her to run, but another part of her hoped he was there to help. She slowed for a moment, unsure, her legs trembling from exhaustion. The man dismounted slowly, carefully, as if he did not want to frighten her. He held a thick coat in his hands, a new coat, clean and warm-looking. He moved toward her slowly, speaking softly, though she could not understand his words. His eyes, though, told her something she could understand. He wanted to help. For the first time in hours, Nayeli stopped running. She stayed very still, watching him, unsure if this was another danger or a chance at safety. The stones still flew behind her. The shouts still echoed in the canyon, but in front of her was someone who did not seem like a threat. Her heart slowed slightly, though her fear was still strong. She was tired beyond belief, every muscle aching, every breath a struggle, but she stayed where she was. The man moved closer, carefully, keeping his hands visible. He held the coat in front of him like a shield, like he wanted to protect her from the danger behind her. Nayeli did not move at first. She had never met someone like him. He spoke softly again, and this time she could feel that he meant no harm. Slowly, hesitantly, she took a step forward, another step, and another. The man waited, patient, allowing her to approach without rushing her. When she was close enough, he gently draped the coat over her shoulders. The fabric was heavy and soft, and for the first time in hours, Nayeli felt warmth and safety. The sun still beat down on her and the stones still flew, but under the man's coat she felt human again. She could breathe, she could think, she could rest, just for a moment, and let herself be cared for. For Nayeli, this moment was like a miracle. She had run through fear, pain, and exhaustion, and now she had found someone who showed kindness when everything around her was cruel. She did not know his name, and she did not know why he had come. but she knew that his coat had saved her dignity, had saved her from despair. And as she looked up at him, her eyes met his, and she understood something very important. In the harshest times, compassion could shine brighter than fear. Nayeli's heart was still racing, but the heavy coat draped over her shoulders made her feel a little safer. The sun was relentless above the canyon, beating down on the rocky ground and making the air shimmer in waves of heat. Dust and sand continued to swirl around her, but for the first time since the attack, she felt a small sense of protection. She looked up at the man who had helped her, the cowboy whose calm presence had stopped the storm of fear around her. He was tall, strong, and steady. His eyes were clear and kind, and he had a careful, gentle way of moving that made her trust him a little. The cowboy, whose name was Thomas, did not speak in a loud voice. Instead, he moved slowly and deliberately, letting Nayeli see that he meant no harm. He kept his coat draped over her shoulders, shielding her from the glaring sunlight and the sharp wind that blew dust into her eyes. He could see the scratches on her arms and legs, the small cuts and bruises where the stones had grazed her. He wanted to reach out and help her, but he also knew that rushing might scare her. So he simply stayed close, letting her know he was there. Nayeli hesitated at first. She had never trusted strangers, especially outside her village. Her people had always told her to be careful around outsiders, but there was something in Thomas's eyes, in the way he held himself, that felt different. There was no anger, no threat, only concern and patience. She slowly took a step closer to him, another step, and then another. The stones had stopped flying for now, as if the attackers were too far behind to reach her, but she did not dare relax completely. Thomas motioned for her to follow him. He pointed to a narrow path that led away from the canyon, one that was hidden by high rocks and shadows. Nayeli nodded, understanding. She knew this was her chance to escape to safety, but the fear in her chest still weighed heavily. Her legs shook as she began to walk, the coat heavy on her small frame, but she did not stumble. She felt the steady presence of Thomas beside her, and it gave her strength. Step by step they moved together, carefully and quietly. As they walked, Nayeli tried to gather her thoughts. She could still hear the faint shouts in the distance, but they were no longer as sharp or close. She realized she had been running for hours, perhaps even more than half a day. Her small body was exhausted, every muscle aching from the effort, every joint stiff from running and dodging. Yet the presence of Thomas gave her hope. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel completely alone. She had someone who was helping her, someone who seemed to care about her well-being. Thomas kept a careful eye on their surroundings. The desert was full of dangers beyond people, steep cliffs, hidden rocks, snakes, and sudden drops. But he had traveled these lands many times. He knew where it was safe to walk and where it was not. He spoke to Nayeli softly, though she could not understand all his words. His tone, however, was comforting. It was calm, steady, and full of reassurance. Nayeli listened to the sound of his voice, letting it guide her steps and calm her mind. After some time, they reached a small alcove in the canyon, hidden by overhanging rocks. It was a quiet place, away from the harsh sunlight and the dangerous eyes of the crowd that had chased her. Thomas gestured for her to sit on the ground, and she did so cautiously, brushing the dust off her legs. He knelt beside her and inspected her arms and legs. He did not touch her roughly, only gently pointing out the scratches and minor cuts that needed attention. Nayeli flinched slightly but did not pull away. She trusted him enough to let him help, even if only a little. Thomas reached into a small bag he carried and pulled out some clean cloths and water. He handed them to Nayeli, showing her how to wipe the dust and dirt from her skin. Nayeli obeyed carefully, grateful for the simple act of kindness. She had not known anyone would help her in this way. The stones and shouts had left her feeling powerless, but this small gesture reminded her that she could still find safety, even in the middle of danger. As she cleaned herself, Nayeli thought about her family and her village. She wondered if they were safe, if they had escaped the chaos of the attack. Her heart ached for them, and for a moment the fear and sorrow threatened to overwhelm her. But Thomas's presence grounded her. He did not ask questions, did not rush her, and did not judge her. He simply waited and supported her in the quietest way possible. His patience gave her time to breathe, to think, and to gather her strength. After a while, Thomas offered her a drink of water. Nayeli took it gratefully, the cool liquid refreshing her dry throat and giving her energy. She noticed that Thomas himself had been traveling under the same harsh sun, yet he remained composed and strong. His clothes were dusty, but he did not show fatigue in the way Nayeli did. She realized he had likely been traveling far to reach this place, and yet he had stopped to help her. She did not know why, but she was deeply thankful. Once Nayeli had rested for a few minutes, Thomas gestured for her to continue walking. He pointed down a winding path that led out of the canyon. Nayeli hesitated, feeling the weight of exhaustion and fear pressing down on her. But Thomas simply waited, giving her the courage to stand and move forward. Step by step, they continued along the hidden path, the rocks and shadows providing cover from anyone who might still be searching for her. As they walked, Thomas occasionally spoke softly, pointing to safe spots on the ground or gestures that indicated where she should step. Nayeli listened carefully, feeling more confident with each step. She realized that this man, who had appeared out of nowhere, had become her protector. She did not fully understand him or why he had come, but his actions spoke louder than words. He had saved her from danger, given her shelter, and provided comfort when she needed it most. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. Nayeli felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief because she had survived the immediate danger. Fear because she still did not know what awaited her beyond the canyon. Yet Thomas continued to move steadily beside her, showing no sign of panic or urgency. His calmness was contagious, and Nayeli felt her own fear ease slightly. She began to notice the small beauty in the desert around her. The way the light danced on the rocks, the sound of the wind through the canyon, the distant call of a bird. For the first time in hours, she could appreciate the world around her instead of focusing only on survival. After some time, they reached a small stream of water hidden between rocks. The clear water glimmered in the fading sunlight, and Nayeli knelt to drink. The cool water soothed her thirst and reminded her that life could still be gentle, even after so much fear. Thomas watched over her silently, keeping an eye on the surrounding desert while she refreshed herself. Nayeli realized that she had never felt so safe with a stranger before. She began to trust him more, understanding that he had no intention to harm her, only to help. Once they had rested, Thomas gestured toward a small grove of trees not far from the stream. It offered shade, shelter, and a place where Nayeli could rest properly. She followed him quietly, feeling a sense of cautious hope. She did not yet understand the man fully, but she knew that with his help, she could survive this day and perhaps find safety beyond the canyon. Step by step, they moved together, and Nayeli began to feel a small spark of courage she had not felt since the attack began. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond fear, a place where she could rest, recover, and maybe even find her family. Thomas had shown her that kindness could exist even in the harshest situations, that not everyone would seek to harm her. And in that moment, Nayeli realized that her survival was not just about running or hiding. It was also about trusting, about accepting help when it was offered, and about believing that there were still good people in the world. Nayeli sat quietly in the small grove of trees, feeling the weight of the coat around her shoulders. The soft fabric had become a comfort, a shield not only against the harsh sunlight, but also against the fear that had gripped her for hours. She watched the leaves rustle gently in the breeze and listened to the distant sound of the stream. For the first time since the attack, she felt a small measure of peace. The panic that had filled her chest was still there, like a faint echo, but it no longer controlled her every movement. Thomas knelt beside her, keeping watch. His eyes scanned the surrounding desert with careful attention, noting every shadow, every sound, every movement. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he waited, allowing Nayeli to rest and regain some strength. He had learned long ago that patience was often the most important tool when helping someone in danger. Rush too quickly, and they might stumble or panic. Move too slowly, and the threat could return. Thomas understood this balance well. After a few minutes of quiet, he gestured for Nayeli to stand. She obeyed, though her legs were still weak and trembling. Thomas indicated that they should continue moving toward safety. He did not rush her, giving her time to steady herself, to catch her breath, and to adjust the heavy coat on her shoulders. Nayeli's small hands clutched the fabric tightly, feeling the warmth and protection it offered. It had become more than just clothing. It was a symbol that someone cared for her, that she was not entirely alone in the world. The path they took was narrow and winding, hidden between rocks and sparse trees. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the desert, turning the rocks a deep shade of orange. Nayeli noticed the beauty in the desert now, something she had been too afraid to see earlier. The golden light illuminated the curves of the canyon, and the breeze carried the faint scent of dry earth and sagebrush. Thomas moved steadily beside her, pointing out safe spots to step and alerting her to rocks or roots that could trip her. Every small gesture reminded her that she was being cared for, watched over, and guided to safety. As they walked, Thomas began to speak softly. Nayeli did not understand all his words, but the tone of his voice was gentle and reassuring. He seemed to be telling her not to fear, to trust him, and to stay calm. Nayeli listened to the rhythm of his voice, letting it soothe her nerves. It was a strange comfort, hearing someone speak calmly while danger had filled the day. She realized that this man, who had appeared suddenly when she was most vulnerable, had become her protector, her guide, and perhaps even her only hope. Hours passed as they slowly made their way through the desert. The rocky ground was uneven, and Nayeli stumbled more than once. But Thomas was always there to steady her. He held her elbow lightly when she needed support and spoke words of encouragement in a soft, steady voice. His calm presence gave her strength, helping her push through exhaustion and fear. With each step, she began to feel more confident in her own ability to survive, knowing she had someone watching over her. At one point, they reached a small clearing where the moonlight began to touch the desert floor. Nayeli paused, looking up at the sky. The stars were bright and clear, scattered across the night like tiny diamonds. She felt a quiet sense of awe and relief. Even after the chaos of the day, even after the stones, the shouting, and the fear, there was still beauty in the world. Thomas noticed her gaze and smiled slightly, as if acknowledging the small moment of peace. He did not speak, only walked beside her, letting the quiet night settle around them. They continued their journey, moving carefully through the night. Thomas led her away from the areas where the townspeople had been. taking hidden paths and small trails that wound through rocks and brush. Naeli followed closely, trusting his knowledge of the land. Her small hands clutched the coat tightly, feeling the warmth and security it offered. Every step reminded her that she was no longer completely alone, that someone cared enough to help her through the darkness. As they moved, Naeli thought about her family. She wondered if they had survived the attack, if they were safe somewhere. The thought of them gave her both hope and sadness. She had been separated from them in the chaos, and the fear of never seeing them again pressed on her heart. But Thomas's presence reminded her that there was still a chance to find safety and perhaps to reunite with those she loved. She allowed herself to hope, even a little, for the first time since the attack began. The desert night was cold, but the coat around her shoulders kept her warm. Thomas noticed her shivering slightly and adjusted the fabric, wrapping it more securely around her. Naeli felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had never known someone to be so thoughtful and kind, especially in the middle of danger. She realized that courage was not just about running or fighting. It was also about caring for others, about being patient and steady when someone needed help most. Thomas had shown her that courage and kindness could exist together. After a while, they reached a small stream that glimmered in the moonlight. The water was clear and calm, and Naeli knelt to drink. The cool liquid refreshed her dry throat and gave her a moment of relief. She splashed some water on her face and arms, feeling slightly renewed. Thomas watched over her carefully, keeping an eye on the surrounding desert while she rested. For the first time, Naeli allowed herself to relax, trusting that he would protect her from any immediate danger. Once they had rested, Thomas gestured for her to continue. He led her toward a small cluster of trees and bushes that offered shelter from the night wind. Naeli followed quietly, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. She did not yet know what lay ahead, but she trusted that Thomas would guide her safely. Step by step they moved forward, and with each step, her courage grew. She realized that she had survived this far not only because of her own determination, but also because someone had believed in her enough to help. As they settled near the small grove, Thomas showed her a dry spot to rest. He built a small fire from dry twigs and branches, the flames casting a warm glow on their faces. Naeli watched the fire flicker, feeling the warmth spread through her chilled body. She felt safe for the first time in hours. Thomas did not speak much, only moved quietly to keep the fire alive and the area secure. His calmness reassured her, and she allowed herself to close her eyes briefly, resting for a short while. While Naeli rested, Thomas thought about the events of the day. He had arrived just in time to help her, sensing the danger before it became too late. He had no way of knowing what would happen after this night, but he was determined to ensure she reached safety. The desert could be cruel and unforgiving, but he had faith that courage, patience, and kindness could guide them through the darkness. He glanced at Naeli, sleeping lightly under the coat, and felt a quiet sense of responsibility. He would not leave her side until she was safe. Morning arrived slowly, painting the desert with soft shades of pink and orange. Naeli awoke to the warmth of the sun and the gentle presence of Thomas nearby. She felt the coat around her shoulders and realized how much it had protected her through the long, cold night. The fire had died down, leaving glowing embers, but the sense of safety remained. Naeli took a deep breath, feeling both relief and gratitude. She knew the journey was not over, but with Thomas by her side, she felt stronger and more hopeful. Together, they continued their journey through the desert, moving carefully but steadily. Naeli walked more confidently now, guided by Thomas's knowledge and steady presence. The rocky terrain, once terrifying, became a path to safety, a challenge they faced together. With each step, Nayeli's trust in him grew. She began to understand that courage was not only in facing danger alone, but also in accepting help and walking alongside someone who cared. By the time they reached a safe area away from the canyon, Nayeli had regained some of her strength and confidence. She looked at Thomas, understanding for the first time the full meaning of his actions. He had rescued her not only from immediate danger, but also from fear and despair. He had restored her sense of hope and safety, showing her that kindness and courage could exist even in the harshest circumstances. Nayeli realized that this journey, though terrifying, had also been a lesson in trust, patience, and the power of human compassion. Nayeli had never felt such relief in her life. The morning sun bathed the desert in warm golden light, and the shadows of the night seemed far away, like they belonged to another world. She adjusted the coat around her shoulders, feeling its weight not as a burden, but as a symbol of protection. Every step she took now was steadier, more confident, though she remained cautious. The memory of the stones and shouts from the day before still lingered in her mind, a sharp reminder of the danger she had escaped. Yet, alongside that fear, there was a new feeling, a fragile sense of hope that perhaps the world could still hold kindness, even in unexpected places. Thomas walked beside her, careful not to rush her. He knew that Nayeli had been through a terrifying ordeal, and patience was the only way to help her regain confidence. The desert around them stretched wide and open, full of jagged rocks, small shrubs, and scattered trees. It could have been intimidating to someone alone, but with Thomas nearby, Nayeli felt a steady sense of security. He spoke little, only offering guidance when necessary, pointing out safe paths, gentle slopes, or routes that might trip her. His calmness was comforting, and she began to rely on it without fear. As they walked, Nayeli thought about what had happened to her family. She did not know if they were safe, and the thought made her chest tighten. Fear returned, but Thomas's presence reminded her that she could take one step at a time, that she did not have to face everything alone. He had saved her from immediate danger, and now he was helping her navigate the path to safety. It was a lesson she was only beginning to understand. Sometimes survival was not only about speed or strength, but about trust, patience, and careful guidance. The desert was quiet except for the soft crunch of their footsteps on the rocky ground and the occasional call of a bird from the distance. Nayeli felt her senses sharpening. She noticed the way the sunlight danced on the edges of the rocks, the way the wind carried the scent of sagebrush, and the gentle rustle of small animals in the bushes. It was almost as if the desert itself was alive, watching them, guiding them. She had spent much of her life in the desert, but she had never appreciated its quiet wisdom until now. With Thomas's help, she began to see beauty where before there had been only fear. They stopped near a small grove of trees where the shade offered relief from the rising heat of the day. Thomas gestured for her to rest, and she sank to the ground, grateful for the moment. He brought out some clean water and offered it to her. Nayeli drank slowly, savoring each sip, letting the cool liquid wash over her parched throat and dry lips. She felt a small wave of gratitude toward him. She did not know his story or why he had chosen to help her, but she understood one thing clearly: his kindness had changed everything. Without him, she might not have survived. As she rested, Nayeli began to reflect on the events of the previous day. She remembered the fear, the stones, and the anger on the faces of those who had chased her. She remembered the exhaustion, the pain, and the despair that had threatened to overwhelm her. And then she remembered Thomas, the calm, steady figure who had appeared just in time, offering protection, guidance, and comfort. His coat had been more than a piece of clothing. It had been a lifeline. It had shielded her, given her warmth, and reminded her that not all humans were cruel. Thomas noticed her thoughtful expression and smiled slightly. He did not speak at first, only waited as Nayeli gathered her strength. Then, softly, he spoke a few words. Nayeli did not understand them completely, but the tone was gentle, reassuring, and encouraging. She felt as if he were telling her that it was okay to rest, that it was okay to hope, and that the path ahead was safe as long as they stayed careful. His presence was like a steady anchor, keeping her grounded in the midst of lingering fear. After a few moments, they continued their journey. Nayeli's steps were stronger now, more confident. The coat remained a constant comfort, a reminder that someone had cared enough to protect her when she needed it most. As they walked, she noticed small details she had missed before. The way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, the sound of distant water, and the tracks of small animals in the sand. These little things reminded her that life continued, even after fear and danger, and that the world could still hold beauty and kindness. Thomas led her carefully, taking paths that were hidden from view and away from the open desert, where danger could lurk. Nayeli began to trust his judgment completely. She followed his movements, matching his pace, and learning from his calm approach. Every careful step taught her that courage was not just about running or hiding, but about moving steadily, thinking ahead, and trusting those who meant no harm. It was a lesson she would carry with her long after this journey was over. As the day wore on, they reached a small hill overlooking a valley. From there, Nayeli could see a settlement in the distance. It was small, quiet, and surrounded by natural barriers that made it safer than the open desert. She felt a surge of hope. Perhaps there she could find people who would help her, and maybe even catch a glimpse of her family. The thought gave her energy to push forward, to continue the journey despite fatigue and lingering fear. Thomas noticed the change in her demeanor and nodded approvingly. She was learning to reclaim her courage, step by step. When they finally approached the outskirts of the settlement, Nayeli paused. She could hear voices, laughter, and the gentle clatter of daily life. It was a stark contrast to the chaos and danger she had fled. She felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. People she had never met, strangers, would be there, and she did not know how they would react. But Thomas's calm presence reminded her that not all encounters would be dangerous. Some could bring help, safety, and even kindness. Thomas led her to a quiet spot just outside the settlement, where they could observe without being noticed. Nayeli watched the people go about their day, families walking together, children playing, merchants tending to their goods. It was peaceful, normal, and alive. Nayeli's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and longing. She realized how much she had missed the simple safety of community, the feeling of being part of a place where life went on without fear. Finally, Thomas spoke, gently encouraging Nayeli to step forward into the settlement. She hesitated, still wary, but she trusted him completely. Slowly, she took her first steps among the people, feeling their curious glances. Some looked surprised, some cautious, but none approached her with anger. Nayeli realized that she had found a place where she could rest, recover, and perhaps begin to rebuild her sense of safety. Thomas walked beside her, still offering silent protection, letting her find the courage to face this new environment. By the time they reached a small home where a kind family offered them shelter, Nayeli felt a sense of relief she had never known. She was no longer alone, no longer exposed to the harshness of the desert or the cruelty of strangers. She had survived, guided by Thomas's courage and patience. She realized that this journey had taught her much more than survival. It had shown her the importance of trust, the power of kindness, and the quiet strength that came from having someone believe in her. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Nayeli sat by the fire inside the shelter, wrapped once more in the coat Thomas had given her. She thought about the events of the past day, the fear, the running, the stones, and finally, the calm, steady presence that had saved her life. She felt gratitude deep in her heart, not just for survival, but for the reminder that courage and kindness could exist together, that even in a world filled with danger, there were people who could restore hope and dignity. Naeli sat quietly by the fire, the warmth of the flames spreading through the room and reaching even her chilled fingers. The coat Thomas had given her, still draped over her shoulders, felt heavier now, not from its fabric, but from the memories it carried. Every thread seemed to hold a story, a moment of courage, and the kindness of a man she barely knew but who had changed her life forever. She looked down at the fabric, running her fingers across its soft surface, and felt a swell of gratitude that was almost too large for her heart to contain. The events of the past days replayed in her mind like a vivid story she could not forget. She remembered the fear, the stones, the shouts, and the way her heart had raced as she ran through the harsh canyon. She remembered the exhaustion that weighed down her small body, making her feel like she could collapse at any moment. And then she remembered Thomas, calm, steady, patient, and full of quiet courage. He had appeared when all hope seemed lost, offering her safety, comfort, and dignity. Naeli realized that his actions had not only saved her life, but had also restored her sense of trust in people. Sitting by the fire, she thought about her family. She had been separated from them during the attack, and the thought of their safety had haunted her constantly. But the shelter she had found and the people who welcomed her reminded her that even in a world filled with danger, there could still be safety, care, and compassion. Nayeli understood now that survival was not just about escaping harm. It was about finding a way back to hope, about discovering that kindness could exist even in the darkest moments. Thomas sat nearby, tending the small fire, but his eyes occasionally flicked toward Nayeli, silently checking on her. She noticed the careful way he moved, the patience in every gesture, and she felt a deep sense of trust. He had never forced her to do anything. He had guided her gently, step by step, letting her find her courage and strength along the way. Nayeli realized that this was rare. Most people, she thought, might have been impatient, harsh, or indifferent. But Thomas had been different. His kindness had not been loud or boastful. It had been steady, quiet, and powerful. As the evening progressed, Nayeli began to speak softly, recounting the moments she remembered most vividly. She told Thomas about the canyon, the stones, and the fear that had threatened to overwhelm her. She spoke of the exhaustion in her legs and arms, and how she had felt the world closing in around her. She did not speak of anger or revenge, only of survival and the relief of finding someone who cared. Thomas listened attentively, nodding occasionally, offering soft words of reassurance. Nayeli realized that he was not just a protector. He was a listener, a companion, and someone who had shared her burden without judgment. The night grew deeper, and the fire's glow cast long shadows across the room. Nayeli thought about what she had learned. She had learned that fear could be overwhelming, but it could also be managed with guidance and patience. She had learned that courage was not always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, steady, and persistent. She had learned that kindness could save lives, not just by shielding someone from harm, but by restoring hope and dignity. And she had learned that even a single act of care could leave a lasting impact on someone's life. Thomas, noticing her thoughtful silence, spoke softly. Nayeli could not understand all his words, but she felt their meaning in the tone, the warmth, and the patience behind them. It was as if he was telling her that her courage had mattered, that her survival had meaning, and that she could continue forward with confidence. Nayeli looked at him and realized that she had come to trust him completely. He had not just guided her through the desert, he had guided her back to herself, helping her remember her strength and resilience even after the chaos and danger. As the night turned into early morning, Nayeli's thoughts drifted to the future. She imagined herself returning to her village, reuniting with her family, and sharing what had happened. She thought about the lessons she would carry with her, the importance of trust, patience, and courage, and the memory of Thomas's quiet kindness that had saved her life. She felt a determination growing inside her, a resolve to move forward and to help others whenever she could. Nayeli realized that her experience, though terrifying, had also shaped her into someone stronger, more aware, and more compassionate. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. Nayeli felt the warmth of its light on her face, and for the first time in days, she felt completely at peace. She knew that danger might still exist in the world, but she also knew that there were people like Thomas, people who could act with courage, patience, and kindness when it was needed most. She felt a quiet gratitude for him, not only for saving her from immediate danger, but also for teaching her a lesson that would stay with her forever. Nayeli realized that she had changed. The fear that had once dominated her thoughts had been tempered by trust and patience. The exhaustion that had weighed down her body had been replaced by renewed energy and hope. The chaos of the attack, once all-consuming, had given way to a deeper understanding of human nature, the balance between fear and kindness, danger and protection. Nayeli felt a newfound strength in herself, knowing that she had survived, learned, and grown because of the experiences of these days. Thomas remained quietly beside her, watching the sunrise, as if sharing the moment without words. Nayeli looked at him and smiled, a small but genuine expression of gratitude and understanding. She did not need to speak to know that he had been an essential part of her journey. His actions had demonstrated courage, patience, and compassion in a way that words could not capture. Nayeli understood that the coat he had given her was more than a physical object. It was a symbol of human kindness and protection, a reminder that even in the harshest moments, someone could act to preserve life and dignity. As the morning progressed, Nayeli began to prepare for the next stage of her journey. She knew that she could not stay in this place forever, but she also knew that she was no longer alone, no longer helpless. She had learned to trust, to move forward carefully, and to value acts of kindness when they appeared. She packed her few belongings, adjusted the coat around her shoulders, and stood tall, feeling stronger than she had in days. Thomas watched her quietly, offering silent support, and Nayeli felt a sense of gratitude that filled her heart. Before leaving, Nayeli took one last look around the shelter. She remembered the quiet moments by the fire, the calmness of Thomas's presence, and the relief she had felt each time she rested. These memories would stay with her forever, a source of courage and guidance in the future. She knew that the world could be harsh and unpredictable, but she also knew that human kindness had the power to change lives, restore hope, and give strength to those in need. As she stepped outside into the bright morning light, Nayeli felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would continue her journey, face the challenges ahead, and carry with her the lessons she had learned. She would remember the fear, the danger, and the exhaustion, but she would also remember the kindness, the patience, and the courage that had saved her. Nayeli understood that life was a series of moments, some difficult and some beautiful, and that the choices people made in those moments could leave lasting impact. Thomas walked beside her as they began to move forward. They did not need to speak. The understanding between them was quiet but complete. Nayeli knew that she had survived not only because of her own determination, but because of the courage and kindness of another. She realized that her life had been shaped forever by this experience, and that she would carry the lessons, the memories, and the gratitude with her for the rest of her life. By the time they reached the edge of the desert, where the land opened up to safer paths and the promise of reunion with her family, Nayeli felt a deep sense of calm and strength. She looked at Thomas and smiled, silently thanking him for everything he had done. The coat around her shoulders felt lighter now, not because of its fabric, but because of the sense of hope and protection it represented. Nayeli knew that the journey ahead might still hold challenges, but she was ready. She was no longer the frightened girl of the canyon. She was stronger, wiser, and filled with the quiet courage that comes from surviving, learning, and being cared for when it mattered most.